Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello. Go ahead. Come on in. It's time now. Welcome to Forward Movement Ministries mobilizing session for the month of October. Our session today is entitled, I'm All of This. I'm abused. I'm abusive. And I still trust in God. Listen, if this is your first time engaging with the Forward Movement community, then I want you to know who you've joined today. Forward Movement Ministries is a community that seeks to remain spiritually resilient as we live out and exercise godly impact for the kingdom in our everyday lives. I am Adrienne Benton. Adrienne Benton, known as the Mobilizer. Why? Because my life work is to mobilize myself and others to be responsible, accountable, impactful in our everyday lives. Listen, I'm going to tell you something that I know you already know. What we already know is that there is no way to get around what is happening all around us. And this afternoon, we're going to acknowledge and communicate our pain and identify how to process through violence, domestic violence, being in relationships that are controlling. Listen, I want to invite you right now to go ahead and get a writing utensil, a pen. Go ahead and get a pen, a pencil, get your journal, a tablet, a notebook, so that you can take notes and can take record of the wonderful resources and actionable plans and steps that you're going to hear about today. So as we get ready to begin, I want to go ahead and invite you to share this session. Go ahead right now and hit the share button. Share it to all of your networks. There's somebody who's watching right now. You may be watching and you might be in a relationship that is experiencing domestic violence, or you may know of someone who is, or you may not know of someone, but it's always good to share this content so that should you come upon a relationship that is going to be what we're talking about today, that you will have the steps and the tools to take those beginning steps to move things forward. So share, and share. Also, go ahead right now and in the comment section, where are you watching from? You'll find in a moment our panelists are from all over the US of A, right? But where are you? Are you in South Carolina like me? Are you in New York, Florida, Georgia, California, Maryland? Where are you? Go ahead and in the comment section, begin to just communicate with us and tell us where you're watching from. And again, hit the share button. Tell your brother, your cousin, your BFF. It's 4 p.m. It's time to join us for the I'm All of This session. I'm abused, I'm abusive, and I still believe in God. Finally. If at this moment you have not taken your finger and pressed like for the Forward Movement Ministries Facebook page, ask yourself why not? I know there's no reason why, right? No reason why not. So that means that right now you need to go ahead and hit like on the Facebook page so that you can stay in contact with our tribe here and receive weekly spiritual resiliency tips and communication. So with that said, I want you to know that today I am honored. I'm really, truly honored to have with me some dear friends who are experts in this field, who are our special guests today. My brother and my sisters are here, and we're going to introduce them one at a time. I want to start off by introducing you to my sister, Dr. DeAndrea Jackson. Dr. Jackson, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for bringing me on today.
Definitely. So glad that you're here. Dr. Jackson, please share with our viewers. Tell us a little bit about who you are and your experience.
First and foremost, I'm a child of God. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. I'm a daughter. I'm also a licensed clinical psychologist. And I have a private practice known as Epiphany Psychotherapy and Consultation here in Columbus, Ohio.
Awesome. Well, we're really glad that you are here with us, and we're looking forward to the wonderful conversation. We have another guest. We want to welcome today Coach June Price. Coach Price, welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to the conversation. I am also a child of God. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, for giving us the right framework. I have practiced as a clinician as well as the twists and turns God will take us on into education and chaplaincy, and now in entrepreneurship in a coaching type of position. So I'm so looking forward to meeting and interacting with everyone online today.
Awesome. Well, we are so glad to have you. All right. Now we have our gentleman, our brother who is going to come and join us now. I want to welcome to the stage, our Gary Graham, brother.
You have me blushing. Adrian, thank you for having me on this panel. I've been looking forward for this for a long time. You know how passionate I am about this. Listen, I am a child of God too. Don't try to keep me out of that realm either. I'm a child of God. I love what's going on here. This is a subject that we are very passionate about, but very qualified. I'm going to claim it. We're qualified to talk about this. And I'm so happy that you brought us all here to attack this issue that's often swept under the rug. I'm not going to hold my tongue today. I'm going to make sure that what we're doing here, that God will anoint this session and people will change the outlook of their lives and notice what is going on. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Awesome. We are so glad that you are here with us. I want to also welcome today Dr. Jael Amador. Prima, welcome.
Hi, Prima. Yeah, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I practice in New York City. I practice primarily with college students at a college counseling center. And I'm so happy to be here. I'm also a child of God. And I'm claiming that today. And I'm also claiming that by God's grace, Adrian has been a sister, a cousin, a friend for many, many years. And I'm so thankful that you put this together. This is an incredibly important topic. And I'm glad that God brought us all here together today.
Awesome. Well, we have one more to bring into the group. I want to bring my sister, Coach and Chaplain Latoya Zavala. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please go ahead and share with our viewers who you are. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
So sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Hi everybody, I'm Latoya, and so I'm going to switch it up a little bit, okay? And I'm going to say I am the creation of God. I'm God's creation. That word actually has a little bit for me. It's really important for me. So switch that up. I am a survivor and thriver of domestic violence, of sexual abuse and assault for much of my life. But I am a thriver, okay? And so that's part of a lot of the reason why I became a chaplain. So I'm a chaplain. I've worked both in the hospital and the military setting now for 10 years. So I am an active duty Navy chaplain, but I am also now a transformational coach, specifically working with women who are coming out of abusive and traumatic relationship situations. So that's what I do. I'm married and I have 3 awesome kids. Moving forward in the family that God has given me. So that's who I am. And I'm so honored to be here to be a part of this very important space and opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all of you. Extremely thrilled that you are here with us. So let's go ahead and start talking a little bit. You know, as we mentioned, this is Domestic Violence Month. And unfortunately, domestic violence and abuse in general is still on the rise right now in 2020. And today, as we have this panel discussion, you know, we really want to go ahead and have a voice, give a voice that calls for action internally and externally in our lives and really in our community. So those of you who are watching, our panelists are here today because they want to be a part of saying, Lord, help us to be able to decrease and ultimately end abuse. And a part of that is not just having the voice, but it's also taking action. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So to all the panelists, I'm just going to start off with this first question in terms of how are you personally doing? How have you been processing all of the challenges that 2020 has brought us?
Whew. I'll just start by saying it got real in 2020. It got real. And all of everything that I've learned about being a Christian has been challenged to me this year. And there's a lot of successes this year, but there's a lot of people that we have lost.
Yes.
And physically and mentally. There's people physically not here, and there's people looking at us when I'm in private practice, and I'm sure some of my colleagues here could say this. You're looking at people and they're looking right through you. It's like, what the heck is going on? And when we were in school, we were taught for self-care. I cannot be an effective therapist or counselor if I don't take care of myself. And I found myself going to the beach more, talking to my wife more, talking to my brothers more, and laying prostrate to God over little things that will snowball quickly. That's the best way I can put it. No matter if my mom or my dad, who's been my rock, or my brothers who've been my rock, or my wife has been my rock, I found myself doing this alone and gaining some character, because we will get through this. We all know that. But what kind of person I'm going to be on the other side, and I'm preparing for that. That's exactly how I could put it.
Yes.
I'll just echo what therapist Graham has said, because he used a word that popped into my mind immediately, which is, it's been a year of character curriculum. We go through crises, and this year has been full of crises on our health front, on our political front, on our interpersonal front. I mean, in every way, it has been full of crises. We go through crises and we come out better or we come out worse, but we never come out the same. So really doing that self-care and saying, what do I need to do in this season of crisis to come out better at the end of it, which really means being accountable to a trustworthy group of people around you, doing good self-care actions. And by the grace of God, and by the grace of God alone, I can say right now, I believe and I see that I'm coming out better.
Amen. Yes. Amen.
I wanted to dovetail a little bit on what Jen said at the end of that, which was community and accountability partner. And, you know, with what Gary was saying, that it's been a really trying year. And I found myself at home just like bawling. I'm just going to tell you the truth. Just bawling when the movement of I Can't Breathe came out, and experiencing some of the things that my son was going through. Just being real, just bawling, breaking down and bawling. And I needed to do some editing in my community. I needed to do some transformation in my circles and the people that were surrounding me and feeding me and pouring into me whatever they were pouring in, right? I needed to make that change, because it was so challenging and life-changing, really life-changing, eye-opening. So yeah, and just really doing the self-work.
Yes.
Doing the self-work.
Yes.
I find that doing the self-work for me means like practicing what I preach. I live in New York City. Here, you sleep 5 hours and then are fueled by coffee the rest of the day. And that's really cool and that's really sexy. It just doesn't work for the bodies that God gave us. And so practicing what I preach, my character development has been, I need a bedtime. I need to sleep 9 to 10 hours. I need to know that I have limitations, setting those boundaries with people that, that are in my life as well, and connecting to people in my life as well. I think it's just really important to recognize that even those of us in the health professions, we need to do the things that we preach to other people as well. A lot of that surrounds self-care and boundaries.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I echo that, Dr. Jael. Boundaries. That's probably boundaries and self-care. I've always practiced self-care, but boundaries has been something that I have really, really learned to implement. even better, right? I encourage my clients to do it, but in personal life, I'm a helper. I'm a giver. I always want to help and give to the people around me. And that self-care is our
Yes.
opportunity for replenishment. And I find that in those roles as wife and as mother, I have been stretched in 2020. I've been stretched by virtual schooling, kindergarten.
I'm here with you.
I have been, oh my goodness, there's nothing like kindergarten on Zoom. It's not pretty, guys. But stretched in terms of knowing I can't do everything. I am not great at everything, and accepting my limitations, and also recognizing I can thrive where I am still good, and I can set those boundaries, not just in my relationships and in the things that I say, yes, I'll do, but also setting boundaries on accessibility, setting boundaries on the amount of information that I allow into my space and that I allow into my energy. News coverage, political coverage, some of those things I just had to, not to an extent of being uninformed, but for the sake of sanity, sometimes you just have to put a boundary on the amount of information overload that you receive. And so I echo what everybody else has said around character building and being stretched and self-care and boundaries.
Yes.
It's been a year,
It
pivotal year.
Listen, all by itself. I was telling somebody the other day, like, we're in October. I feel like 2020 should be ending now, and that like November and December are these extra months to the year, you know, because this has been some year. But Dr. Jackson, I'm going to go ahead and start with you as we move into this conversation of domestic violence, and I'm going to change it up just a little bit from you know, Dr. Jackson, for somebody who may be watching out there and they know conceptually what domestic violence is, but don't really know. Can you just talk to us a little bit about what are the different types of, what is domestic violence and what are the different types of domestic violence?
Most certainly. It happens in lots of different forms. I think a lot of times people only equate it with physical violence, right? Beating or hurting, breaking bones, black eyes, those kinds of things is what people often equate domestic violence to. I think we've expanded our idea to include emotional abuse or psychological abuse. But some of the things that are less focused on or talked about are things like stalking. Sexual violence is something that we talk about. We don't talk about it as much in the context of a marital relationship. So marital rape is also something. Reproductive coercion is sexual abuse as well. Pet abuse is something that we have to consider. And economic abuse is one of the things that has lingering impacts, but it's one of the ways that people tend to also experience abuse in their lives. So we know that with economic abuse, it's the control over money, right? It's financial restriction, lack of access, don't have your own account, have to ask for money. It's a way to maintain power in the relationship. Sexual abuse, of course, is forced or it's threatened sexual activity that is unwanted. It can feel like coercion or intimidation to engage in sexual activity, or even manipulation in terms of just kind of urging someone and bending their mind in ways that will make them more available to what it is that they want to occur from an intimacy standpoint. Stalking can take forms of watching, right? So the idea of like movies, somebody watching outside of your home, it can be digital or virtual stalking. And that's also something that occurs a lot now with a lot of social media activity. And then pet abuse being pets are threatened, they're harmed, or they're killed by someone's partner. And that can also show up in relationships as well as physical violence escalates.
Yeah. Any other panelists from your experience, you know, when it comes to the realm of domestic violence, how do you explain that to people?
I go a little further than that, Doc Jackson. As a guy, I recognize certain things. Victims are chosen. And I'll give it to you straight. Like, so when we grew up, you don't date young ladies that have 5 brothers, because you know if you mess with them, you're gonna get. She know how to fight 5 brothers. I'm gonna say that, or the 5 brothers are gonna come at you. And same thing with 2 family homes, male and a female. You know, they you know that You're not going to try to, unless you're strong and you got your game together, you're not going over somebody's house where their father is going to be there, because the father is going to, that's the first line of defense of their baby. Ask my brother Patrick and Paul about that. They have young ladies. But I go to something simple as this, and people are going to get mad, but I'm anointed, and I feel when I say this. When my wife drives her car to work, okay, that's her independence. And she goes to lunch with her friends at work, pre-pandemic I'm talking about, okay? There's some men that has to drop off their wife at work. They have to call their wife from work in the middle of the day, and they have to get picked up. When I see that, I kind of check that off in my head. When that person gets pregnant and they say things, you wanted this baby, I didn't ask for this baby. Each day you're imprisoned by gaslighting and manipulation, and it gets to a point where they're strangled to the point. And then the other part that I look for is, and it just falls on my lap, and you could throw this in there. When I see a couple together for 7 years and they're not married and they have children and they're acting like a married couple, I check that off too. So that may not be popular or what have you. And when I get into these sessions and it said he promised to marry me and he promised to do this and he moved it there, and then what Doc also said, financial manipulation. These are little seeds. Before the hammer comes down.
If you could repeat your last sentence again, because it broke up just a little bit, your last sentence one more time.
I do agree with Doc Jackson with financial manipulation, whether that person is the breadwinner or not. When the money comes in, he or she dominates where the money goes.
I'd just like to piggyback on what Dr. Jackson and Gary have talked about, and really just show the large umbrella over all abuse is this core of emotional and psychological control. So regardless if we're talking about this financial abuse, it is pet abuse, if it's a physical abuse, really at the umbrella level, there is a drive to be emotionally and psychologically controlling.
So I started to say the same thing, Coach June. I started to say the same thing, right? That really it can be thought of as power and control. Power and control. If I have to have power over you as far as how you're using your phone, when you're using your phone, how you're using your money, when you're using your money, what are you buying? I remember in my situation, buying a CD man. I'm dating myself, I know. Some of y'all remember that CD man. It had to have the stabilizer, right? Okay. And I remember I was so proud of myself. I went and bought my little CD man at the stabilizer, and it was a sports one, so it could get wet and all that. And my abuser was like, no, you didn't ask for permission. And so I think even so, for people to understand that it doesn't have to be what you would consider the extreme, right? But the small aspects and elements of control. I have to have control and power of you. And I wanted to say something. Sometimes, Spirit help me, sometimes it's difficult for Christians to differentiate because we have not differentiated between power and control and submission. And so a lot of times we're hearing preached from the pulpit, right? And from wherever you're getting, right? If it's your pulpit or wherever you're from, mosque, whatever it is, this idea of, submission to your husband, submission to the head of the household. And there isn't that differentiation between what is that? Well, how does that look godly? And what is power and control? And so sometimes we're caught in this and not realizing that it is actually abuse that's happening. So I just wanted to mention that.
I'll add to that just to help give. I was just going to add an example to that, only because I 100% resonate with what you've been saying, Chaplain. And I think a good way for us inside the church to recognize a difference is anytime two equals. A husband and a wife are meant to be two equals. Anytime in that relationship it starts to function as a parent-child relationship, that's a huge red
Wow.
flag that there is abuse happening.
Mm.
And submission is a completely different thing. And what you're describing is what was meant to be a equal two co-people living together and existing together, turning into one. It could be the male or the female, turning into the parent role and the other put into the child role.
Yes, yes. I'm going to ask you if you can say that one more time, because that was powerful. Can you say that one more time?
Just trying to give a clear picture for those of us inside the church who've really struggled for years to understand this difference between, okay, well, what is abusive and what is a submission? And when you understand that two people living together are meant to be equal co-partners in marriage, in relationship, even if you're not married, if at any time you start to see that dynamic turn into a parent-child relationship, then you can be certain that this has nothing to do with submission.
Wonderful.
And has everything to do with some red flags of an abusive situation.
Yes,
Wonderful.
yes. Those of you who are watching, we definitely want you to put comments or ask questions. So, Gary, Counselor Gary, we have a question for you. Maxine Legal says, what does checking it off mean? So I think earlier in your comments, you mentioned checking it off. What does that mean, Counselor Graham?
Well, let me say this. All counselors, and I'll go back to the question about 2020, I find myself wanting to be better each time. All of us have some instincts. You know, I live here in New York City. There's diversity and what have you. I have 2 offices, but there's just things that jumps out. So for Maxine, I'll just tell you, I check off certain things, not like a grocery list, but like when I go through session 1 or session 2, and I'll repeat what I say. It's like I ask simple questions, and people get annoyed in sessions. I get to know them. So, what time do you go to work? Well, I work from 7 to 7. I'm a nurse. Okay. And so, do you take the train or you have your own car? Well, I wanted to have my own car, but my husband drops me off at 7 and picks me up at 7. I check that off. Okay. Because in New York City, everybody works the same hours basically, or it overlaps or what have you. So I check something like that off. Or I check off things like, oh, well, the last party that you had, you know, the husband comes in with a mug face and is angry with everybody. At church, at functions, you know, what's wrong with Brother Graham? He's always upset or what have you. Oh, that's just the way he is. No, Brother Graham is mad at his wife and his kid. Brother Graham is the parent, like June said, and she is the child, and you check that off. So your instinct comes in, and then you put your instincts against what we call facts that's going on, and then you can anticipate that that they'll come and say, well, you know, I'm pregnant. This is our 4th child. And he came to me in the living room and he said, this is what you wanted. I have nothing to do with that. Those are some stinging words to say to a woman that's a nurse that works 12-hour shifts that has 3 kids. And it may sound outlandish to somebody who may live in Texas or Ohio or Seattle, but in New York City, that's the life that we live. And then we check that off. And then we find out that there's a lot of gaslighting going on. And then your instinct along with your training moves to a point where you get the big check is like, well, this may be a domestic violence problem. No wonder why she has anxiety. No wonder she's crying and depressed all the time. Thank you, Maxine, for that question.
Can I piggyback?
Sure.
It sounds to me, as a counselor in private practice as well, sounds to me like the dynamic assessment of what's going on in a person's life and the context of the things that are bringing them to the practice at that point in time in order to understand a little bit more about what's going on in their life. So not check boxes, not this is the grocery list, like you said, but those contextual elements of what's happening in a person's life so that you can better understand, better hypothesize what's going on and how you can best assist them. So Someone was saying, is it like red flags? Absolutely. It's red flags for threads that we should pull a little bit more on, or things that we should pay more attention to, so that with our clinical spidey senses, we're better able to try to meet the needs of our clients.
Yes. Dr. Jael, I'm going to ask you
And then if I could add that in it,
please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in addition to that, I'm glad that you brought up Gary, instinct, right? Because one of the things that I always like to express to the clients that I see is like, what are the red flags or the sensations that you're feeling in your body when we're in situations that are not right, that are danger signals for us? We feel fear. And that gave us this really great mechanism called fight or flight. And that's one way that you can start differentiating between, like, is this submission or is this an abusive relationship, right? Like, submission is not going to bring you into fight or flight. It's not going to make your heartbeat go up and you start sweating and you feel like these physical elements of fear. So that's part of something that people need to pay attention to. Are these signals that God has given us, right? Like these signals of fight or flight, are they playing into these dynamics and these contexts in these relationships?
Most definitely. And Dr. Jael, I'm going to ask you this question so you can kind of continue. Why is it sometimes so difficult to get away from people who are traumatizing us or controlling us?
Yeah, that's a really great and just up front, a very complicated question, because it's never just one reason. It could be a myriad of reasons. And I could, just to name a few, I think, when we've already talked about like financial abuse and financial reasons why people can't leave certain relationships. If it's more kind of like, emotional in addition to other types of abuse, there could be low self-esteem involved. A number of times, people who have disabilities have a really difficult time leaving relationships because the world is not built to take care of people that are not able-bodied.
It's true.
We've talked about pet abuse. We've talked about children and expectations of. I thought someone was going to say something. I apologize.
No, I didn't want to cut you off.
Another thing that we need to talk about are like expectations from. Yeah, we need to talk about expectations from our communities, right? I grew up in a time when abuse in certain relationships were open secrets within my church, right? And the expectation within my church was that these women would stay in those certain relationships, right? And that we had to hold the sanctity of marriage, which I believe is sacred, but above the safety of somebody, right? And so expectations about, what it means to be a good mother, what it means to be a good wife, a good father, a good husband, play into all of these things. And so I think that plays into this one very, very important fact, is that leaving abusive relationships, it doesn't happen right away, right? It takes time, it takes planning, it takes trial and error. On average, I believe, and this could have changed, but I believe it takes about 7 times for a person to be able to leave an abusive relationship. And so I think it's just really important for us to understand that, so that what I tell people, who are in that situation, is that if this time failed, all that meant was that this wasn't the time. We're going to plan for the next time. And we're going to plan to be able to kind of like figure out, okay, what failed here? How can we shore you up? And how can we make you feel comfortable so that you're able to do it the next time?
Powerful.
This is one of the questions that I ask when I'm interviewing former victims on my podcast. And what comes out very often is the hope.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't leave because we hoped. We're hoping for the change. We're hoping that we will be the ones that will change him. We're hoping that that God will come in and do the miracle. We're hoping that my pastor or my elder is gonna come in and he's gonna change, and this time is gonna be the last time. And it's the hope that, oh, if I have this baby, now it's gonna change, right? So there's this hope that drives. And I'm just gonna be honest, y'all, because we've all kind of touched on it, right? And some of that hope is coming from that miseducation in the pulpits and in the church about this misunderstanding of what submission means and what stick it out means. And so some of that hope is coming from those places. And I remember, one victim was saying the hope was so strong, and not just coming from myself, but from my family and from his family. And even my mother-in-law was here not too long ago, and my husband asked her, "Why did you stay?" She was abused up until maybe like 5 years before he died. Actually, they were married for some 40 years. And he finally asked her, "Why did you stay?" And she said, "Because you love them and you hope. Every time you're hoping that he's telling the truth and this is going to be the last time." So that is something that definitely, it's such a delicate place when you're working with someone who's coming out of that, because you don't want to, right? How it's that delicate comfort and support of keeping faith, right? Not letting go of your faith, but understanding the true nature of what's happening and what it is, and when, and healing process, and all of that, right? Boundaries and protection and free will, and so like all of that, right? And not trying not to damage the faith.
Well, definitely.
I wanted to add something, and this may take it down the path. This is a slippery slope, but we have to talk about it. You talk about the culture in our church, and I'm gonna use an example. Our Senator Mitch McConnell was shown with bruises, and he says there's nothing there, and it's clearly something there. But one of the things is something that I grew up embracing that I have to unlearn is something like when What Love's Got to Do with It with Tina Turner and Ike Turner came out, and that movie came out, and we mocked the fact that Ike Turner was beating Tina Turner, and especially in the Black community, we all giggled about it. Women and men, is like, "Eat the cake, anime. We'll be at Thanksgiving dinner," and then I go over to my brother and I was like, "Oh, eat the cake, anime," and we'll all laugh and we'll all joke, knowing that we have embraced that behavior through pop culture.
Wow.
And knowing that there are eat the animes going on in our church, and me as a man, and I have two brothers, and I'm gonna be very fair, Adrian. You know how straightforward I am.
Yes.
If Pat or Paul is hitting their wives and their wives came to me, I shouldn't have to think twice to talk to them about that. But you know what? You know what I'm about to say. I will have to sit down and come with a speech to talk to my brothers why you laid.
Yes. I think we totally.
Why did you lay your hands on Natalie and Wendy? And brothers don't have that conversation, and I really wanted to bring that out. We have embraced pop culture and we have lauded it for it the right thing. So kind of like Ike Turner is kind of like a sub-zero superhero in a lot of cultures.
Wow, we are getting.
And if I could add to that, I think that we also have a tendency to laugh at or vilify men who are in abusive relationships as well.
Right.
We call them names. We say that they're weak. We question their manhood and we question their humanity. And I think what Gary, I hope I didn't lose him, but I think that what he brought up was incredibly important because, part of these cycles continuing is as a culture maintaining these beliefs and maintaining these norms that it's okay to laugh at people in these situations when the reality is that these are real painful situations.
Yes, they are. We're getting some really great feedback from our viewers, and we just want to read a few of them as we continue in the conversation. So Maxine says, I think low self-esteem and self-confidence makes people stay in these abusive relationships. They feel that they can't find anyone better and that this is love. So true, Maxine. I think many of us can identify and understand that. Ruth says, absolutely, hope is good, but truth and education is also essential. So true. And that's why it's important for us as a community to have these conversations where we're just being honest about the biases, the opinions, and honest about our action steps for moving forward. Kimberly Anderson says, often churches present hope that only ends with continuing a relationship. However, often the hope lies on the other side of ending the relationship. Wow. Again, another truth. Ruth said counselors need to be able to present the reality to people in a safe place, most definitely. And we're going to talk about that towards the end of this as well. So I want to go back, Dr. Jackson, can you just talk to us a little bit? What are some of the short-term and some of the long-term psychological effects on individuals who are experiencing DV, domestic violence?
Sure, absolutely. I think we can go right back to what Dr. Jael said about self-esteem issues. When clients present in a therapy setting, sometimes we'll see it lead in with some self-esteem issues. Other times we'll see it manifest in different ways, like difficulty sleeping, chronic stress, moodiness is something that we'll often see. Difficulty concentrating, the weight of the world is on them, the pensiveness in their home creates this difficulty with being present from moment to moment because you don't know what's going to happen or when is this person going to lose their cool again and things are going to escalate. We see shame as a short-term and a long-term experience that people are dealing with, and sometimes guilt as well around, did I cause this? Was it something that I did? Am I responsible? And so needing to differentiate between blame and responsibility and shame and guilt is something that we often have to do in a therapy setting. I think there's a lot of confusion because with that hope that people are trying to hold on to, there's also this confusion about, should I still be staying here? Should I be holding on to this hope or should I be trusting myself? Questioning their decision making or their discernment or how did I get here? I thought I knew people and maybe now I don't because the person that I thought I knew and fell in love with or trusted is now somebody totally different than I believed them to be before. A lot of social isolation is a short-term impact that we see as well. We talked about power and control and the emotional and physical control that someone is wielding as an abuser. And so oftentimes to keep their victim in a vulnerable state, they're socially isolating them, pulling them away from their support systems so that other people who could be there for them, who could intervene, don't know as much. So we're seeing a lot of emotional burden, a lot of fear. Dr. Jael talked about that fight or flight gift that God has given us. And that fear can be accompanied by those physiological experiences of anxiety and panic. And that's something that we see. And we can't forget, just last month was Suicide Prevention Month. And suicidal ideation happens as well. And I think it's something that is not talked about often enough in terms of if there's hopelessness, right? Hope that the relationship might get better or hopelessness that I don't have a way out of this. People may begin to think that my only way out is to take my own life. And that's something that we also see as a short-term impact or effect of domestic violence. Anybody else have anything else that they see in their practices or from their experience?
I wanted to kind of like give a picture of that a little bit. I'm not sure the picture is the right word, but just make it a little more tangible. Like I agree with everything, definitely what you're saying. As a survivor and former victim myself, and then also our middle child we're in the process of adopting. It's almost complete now, and he also suffered some of that trauma. What's interesting is that the triggers, right? You're not even completely and totally aware of how the trauma is manifesting in you. And sometimes it manifests, it's like a slow roll, kind of a slow reveal sometimes, right? And so, and sometimes it's a trigger that then reveals, and then the awareness comes like, oh my God, that too. And then, and I'm seeing it now even with my son. And so it's the awareness. But I just want to encourage you, if you've gone through something like that, or if you have felt something like that, I want to encourage you that there is light at the tunnel, at the end of the tunnel, and there is healing. And sometimes that suicide ideation comes from that aftermath, because you feel like you can't get away from these triggers. And when you feel like you're healing, and then another trigger happens, or and then you realize something else, and then that triggers something else in you. It's like that slow roll reveal. But if you can tap into that community, if you can tap into some kind of either the clinician or therapy or coach or someone that can give you that accountability and that support as you're going through that slow roll and that reveal, that there is healing, there is light at the end of the tunnel, that all of those things that you're experiencing is your body's magnificence helping you to overcome and be victorious.
Yes, 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 yes. So we're going to turn the corner just a little bit. Coach June, what if I'm the one that's doing the abusing, right? What do you say to someone who may be watching and they're the controller, they are the manipulator, they admit that they are the one that's doing the abusing? What can we say to what do you say to them as far as can somebody change?
Great question. And I want to just start by saying we're so conditioned in our states and in our societies that we automatically want to make it this all or nothing thinking. We automatically want to say, okay, we're all about supporting the victim and rescuing the victim. But I need you to know, if you are the victimizer, that the professionals sitting before you today are your champions as well, because we do not want you to stay in what is become a prison for yourself, as well as a prison for everyone else in that household. So if you have access to empathy still, if you have the capacity to actually and truly empathize with those that you are abusing still, friends, there is hope for you. I need you to recognize that there is a difference between being a sociopath and completely disregarding and having no empathy for the things that you're doing that are inflicting harm and destruction in every wake that you leave, and someone who is leaving wakes of destruction and harm, but truly is able to access empathy still, that this is not the person I want to be, but this is who I keep coming back to be. I need to be honest with you. If you could have changed it by yourself, you would have changed it already. So it's time to stop lying to yourself and saying, oh, I'll just try harder. Friend, trying harder has not worked at all. So trying harder will not work now. It's time for you to get serious and get help, get professional help. It's one thing to have a buddy that you can be honest with and say, I'm so sorry. It's one thing to have a girlfriend who you can be, oh, this is not who I want to be, but I keep going back to doing this. It's something entirely different to get serious and say, I have to break this cycle. Yes. And if you're willing to get serious and say, I want to break that cycle, then I would say, please find an expert in the issue of dealing with someone who has abusive behaviors. Do yourself the favor. You would not go for a brain injury to see a pulmonologist. So please find an expert who deals with abusers and really give yourself the best opportunity to go and make that change. I also want to say to you, with all that hope before you, that you're going to have to make some tough decisions. If you want to change, then you're going to have to be the person who says, I can't be trusted. You cannot trust me. I can't trust myself. So maybe it is time for me to take myself out of the home where I keep being the abuser to do some serious work on myself so that I can re-engage and we can have this hope that the victim keeps holding on to, that things will change and we can both be working toward that. But it's really time for some drastic changes. If you're at that place, abuser, which is really possible for change to come.
Yes, yes, I love that. Anyone else? Any other thoughts as far as if you're talking to, how do you counsel someone who comes to you and they're the aggressor?
Well, I'll answer and I'll let anyone else add in. part of being a good clinician, a good coach, a good therapist, a good psychologist, a good psychiatrist is having the ability to recognize our own bias. So we have to be able to say, for me, it's God. God, help me not to look at this person with my own bias and my own judgment. Help me to look at them with your heart, with your eyes, and to see the brokenness that they have maybe fed, watered, and fertilized in order to get it to grow to the place where it's all out abuse to their neighborhood, to their community, and to their family. But God, the fact that they're sitting before me today saying that they want help, let me see them the way that you see them. Let me care for them with grace and the same tender compassion that I would care for the person they're abusing with.
Yes.
That's major. That's big what you just said. Because that is something that we have to strive for. It's easy as a therapist, when somebody walks into my office, they often come in way too late. They come in after the fact, either that they're going to jail or they have lost their status or they have hurt somebody. And we have to sit there because we answer to a higher calling and do our best. It's like, do you really want to help this person that just messed up everything for their family? And so, June, that you're absolutely right. And those are some of the struggles of humanity, of being a therapist or a counselor. We're not showing empathy towards the abuser. We are showing empathy to the abused. So I want to thank you for stating that, because that is very true.
And I couldn't catch the whole name, but Sanaya, I think, just popped up as saying on the feed that was so important, because it is true. Therapists, in order to be good, viable, competent, we need to be daily processing ourselves with trusted other clinicians.
Yes. And we've been getting some really good comments from our community. So you see Shauna K here. She says, which is why we must have our own therapy, peer supervision, and other methods of introspection and self-awareness. Casey Zapp, powerful June. We have to have the divine mindset and perspective when we approach others and interact with them. Georgina wrote, says, this is exactly why one should find a professional. We love our pastors, but many are not equipped to expertly provide services to an abuser. And it's true. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's a point of referral, a point of, when somebody comes to you, you're in ministry, you pray with them, you see what the issue is, and you figure out how can I refer them so that they can get the best care, the best opportunity for redemption and rehabilitation as possible. Thank you so much. This is great. Yes, Latoya.
And I just wanted to say, I wanted to bring it to the other side, that maybe if you are not in that position, right? You're not a therapist or counselor or coach or whatever it is, and you are the friend, you are the brother, you are the, the bystander, and this person is coming to you and saying, it's like, also, it's really important on the other side to not excuse the behavior, right? To not excuse it, right? To not allow the person or yourself to go to the point where you're like, yeah, I know you were really stressed today. I know you've been working really hard, right? Don't allow your love for the person to enable the person, right? Okay, so we're gonna recognize, okay, yes, you've been stressed. Yes, you've been working hard. Yes, you got 10 kids, got it. However, you need professional help. How can I support you in getting the professional help? Like, just be direct, be honest, be truthful. It is the best way to love your brother and sister. It is the best way.
I would say as well that this is a great example, again, of how in the church, in religion, we have been conditioned to actually enable some behaviors to go on under the name of this is Christ-like. Right. That is not the Christ-like way of responding to abuse and dysfunction when you see it. It is exactly as the chaplain has already spoken. It is speaking the truth in love and not giving a pass because you think the pass sounds more gracious. That's not grace.
So one of the things I've been working on as a therapist, I go back to culture. So this is Domestic Violence Month, but breast cancer awareness has kind of like engulfed it. So you don't see the NFL that has a lot of men having domestic violence wearing purple socks, or you don't see a purple ribbon, because that goes against what they honestly believe. So we have to fight through that. So we have to have the hard conversation. And I go back to the culture I told you about, Ike Turner or what have you. So one of the hard conversations that we need to do is like, when I sit down, this is what I'm working on. After a year, and I'll be, very successful. I think I'm very successful when somebody comes into and I'll just use LaToya, for instance, and I'll say something like, did he put his hands on you? That waters down everything. That in our community, that's code for saying, did he hit you? I have to learn to say, did you attack her? Did you punch her? Did you hit her? Because that's the impact we were taught, and we need to elevate that. So when a preacher who has a captive audience goes up there, is like, look, brethren, we need not to put our hands on women. Or you need to say, brethren, you need to stop punching and choking and hurting your women and bruising them. There's a difference.
Yes.
And so when we're ready to have that, the one thing I could tell you I learned in 2020, I go back to the question that you started with. This year, the reason why God has brought me through, and I'll share this with you, is because I've had to have hard conversation with Gary Graham, and hard conversation with my son, and hard conversation with my wife. And if we don't call it like it is only going to continue.
I wanted to, you've mentioned, several people have mentioned here, like the culture, right? And so sometimes especially when I'm talking to my married couples or my pre-married couples, I'm telling them, listen, it's a war out here. You have to be hyper alert. You have to be hyper aware. The culture that we are in is not for healthy marriages. That's just the reality. And as much, we're like a push and pull. We're out here saying, hey, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And at the same time, we're perpetuating violence and abuse. So you've got to be hyper aware. You are the first line of defense for your marriage and for this healthiness. Talking about pop culture, and I'm not, believe me, I'm not contra pop culture. I'm not. But when we see things like, and I said this was years and years ago. Please, I don't know what year it was, but there was an award ceremony. But this image is imprinted in my mind. There was an award ceremony, and Snoop Dogg, I'm gonna call his name, was going on the red carpet. He had a dog collar around his neck. I don't know if anybody else remembers this. He had a dog collar around his neck, and there were chains, like 3 of them, connected to this dog collar. And
to woman.
And the chains were connected to women. Like they were his dogs following him into the ceremony. And I was like, how are we saying, hey, y'all, Domestic Awareness Violence Month, and let's get out there and protect. And then you are publicizing this, right, for millions of viewers. Okay. The other one is Adam Levine's video. I happened upon it. I don't even remember how I happened upon it, but it's, I got to say it because I need for y'all to be aware, right? This video, the song is called Animals. And the video is about him being a butcher, stalking this woman. Stalking this woman. In the video, he is literally fantasizing about sexualizing, killing her. So very graphic. I'm talking about with blood and like he's a butcher, right? I'm talking about, it is the most disgusting, demoralizing. And yet I'm like, I don't even know how this is legal, honestly, for this to be a music video published. It literally is about stalking and sexualizing, killing this woman. And so I'm talking about us being aware of what our culture truly is saying. There's a point where we're speaking, and then there's a point where we are communicating in so many other ways, right? We talk about talking out of your neck. You heard that expression before, right? So being aware that, especially, I'm so glad you said it, Gary, that our culture is not for healthy relationships, is not for really truly healing and coming out of this domestic violence. So we've got to be the voices. We've got to stand up. We've got to raise the flag. We've got to not, like we said, somebody said no excuses. Absolutely. We've got to open our mouths and be the voice and live it and speak it and say it and show it.
Yes, yes. So we're getting some really good comments and questions. There's 2 questions that have recently come, and I'm going to kind of link them together. And this is for anybody to respond to. Casey Zapp says, what happens when you are tired of the war? It can wear people out. So that's question A. All right. What happens when you're tired? But then question B that goes with it, Christina Anderson Smith says, I'm late to the conversation, but has anyone addressed when it's appropriate to involve law enforcement when abuse is evident? Sometimes counseling is the passive approach. Okay. So what happens when somebody's tired of the struggle, and when should we involve law enforcement? When should law enforcement be involved? And open up to anyone.
Well, let me answer that last part. I want to say, I don't think counseling is a passive approach at all. Again, people come to my office when they are in trouble. So I think that is a proactive approach, especially when the abuser says, look, I did something that I shouldn't have done. I need to see a counselor. And again, I'll be transparent. I'm an expert like in substance abuse and public health, but because of the lack of Black therapists, people will look through Aetna or Cigna, say, I need a Black therapist. I have domestic violence. I'm going to pick Gary Graham, right? I only could tell you this much, And in fact, I have no problem telling you, Adrian, I know 2 people who are experts in DV. So my job as a therapist is to move them along to the person who's an expert. So I will say that law enforcement is tricky. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I have no problem saying this in the culture, because if you call the police, your partner may be killed by the police. This is a fact of life in our community. So even though your husband has been abusing you or your wife has been abusing you, and there's a chance that when that person comes through the door, that person may not come back, or there's some type of retaliation, or is not taken seriously.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you, that gives me the creeps where that is. So I'm going to pass it on to my colleagues for this hour with the law enforcement, but I want people to know what actually is going through my mind when there's, just like a person has a mental health breakdown, you're afraid to call the police because you don't know if that person is going to get killed or not. And this is a reality in our community.
I'd like to say something. I'd like to respond a little bit. Thank you, Gary. I can see where the question comes from, because I have seen it, I think, a few times where people come they're going through the process, right? So military, going through the process as a passive way almost, because like, for example, the military, they'll separate them and they say, okay, you got to go to counseling before you guys can get back together. And so they're like, it's a check in the box. Like it's, right. And even for the spouse sometimes, okay, so we're going to go ahead and check the box so that I can go ahead and continue doing what I'm doing, or so that I can still cover, let's not get it completely out there. So I can still cover what I'm doing. So and I've seen it before. I don't know if you guys have seen it before, but they've come into my office and we're like, okay, let's do the work. And one party is waiting to do the work, but the other part, you can clearly see they're not there to do. They're there because they want to pacify the spouse, or they want to give the appearance that they're trying to change or they're ready to change. So I think I understand that question, that sometimes they're coming for the passive approach. I think, as far as law enforcement is concerned, a really good book to read is, and it doesn't address this specifically, but the picture is so very clear. Trevor Noah's autobiography, Born a Crime, and he talks about domestic violence of his mom. and how law enforcement handled it. And although it happened in South Africa, I mean, it could be any country, any city. What happened to her. And so I agree with you, Gary. It's very tricky, especially the way some of our cultures are skewed to pass things off. Mm-hmm. But I still think it's important for you to call the police, to get them involved, to get it on record, to have your police reports, to do what the country has said that they have given you, so that there is absolutely no excuse. There's absolutely no the loopholes that they can't come back at you and say, well, you didn't say anything, or you didn't call.
Right.
You cover your bases. You call, you get your police reports, you save them. You go to different police precincts. You keep fighting for your freedom, for what you are, the rights that are supposed to be afforded to you. I would go to different police precincts until you get get yourself the advocate. Every major city is going to have a hub, some domestic violence, call the domestic violence hotline, so that they can help you find the hub to go get your advocate that can help advocate for you through the legal system. The other question, I know when you're tired of fighting. So man, that question resonated with me so very deeply. Because when that movement came out, I can't breathe. And I know it's not the same thing as domestic violence, but it's the oppression, the feeling of oppression. Okay. And I, at the moment, felt I am tired of fighting. And I found myself on my knees bawling. Mercy. And I found myself quoting the scripture, when, Lord, when? When, God? Like, I feel tears in my eyes right now. When, God? And so I'm feeling that so very deeply, not just for that movement, but for the women who are fighting the injustice in the system and the imbalance and all of the, like, when, right? When you're tired of fighting. And so my answer, honestly, is when you feel that exhaustion, that it's okay to take a knee. Take a knee.
Love it.
It's okay to feel that emotion, to feel the pain, to feel it. And then allow the Holy Spirit to come in. Allow the strengthening, allow the healing, allow the refreshing and the rejuvenating. You're going to see it even in many scriptures, including the Bible, where the people that we would consider the greats, Elijah had to take a knee. Moses had to take a knee. David at many points had to take a knee. When I say take a knee, I'm talking about, you know what? Okay, I can't. Elijah said, I'm going to lay down here and die. To recognize that there's sometimes you're going to feel that the fight is real. Recognize that it is real. It is painful sometimes, and it's okay to feel that. Yes. And allow yourself to take a knee, be refreshed, be re-strengthened. Do the things that fill your soul, that feed your soul. Allow the Spirit to come in. Yes. And then when we're ready, we get back up. And we get back in there.
It's powerful, powerful. So we're getting some more questions in the comments, and there's two, one in particular that we've had several people ask. So I really want us to address this, and it's open to everybody. Okay, so Dr. Paul Anderson says, from Yvette, please talk about those facing psychological, emotional abuse instead of physical abuse. So if we could just spend a few more moments and kind of walk with everyone and really just kind of let's dive into emotional abuse.
Well, I want to say that, and we talked about this at the beginning, those who are experiencing the physical abuse are also experiencing the psychological and emotional abuse. It is prevalent, and it is that underlying baseline for all other abuses. Those who are not to the place where they're experiencing physical abuse, they're just experiencing the emotional and psychological abuse, are almost in a position where they can feel like they're going crazy because their abuser is so astute at being charming to everyone else.
Preach.
They can have your parents, they can have your best friends, they can have your preacher, they can have even your therapist that you go to on a weekly basis, thinking that you're the problem. And that the abuser actually is the one who has the enlightened understanding that you're the irrational one and that they're the rational one. So it's so important for us to really understand some of the signs that come with emotional abuse. So if you have a friend who you recognize, man, they're just not acting like themselves anymore. Dr. Jackson said it earlier so well. They're irritable, and they didn't used to be irritable at all. They're apathetic. They don't have no desire and no drive. They're facing hopelessness. They're feeling crazy. They tell you they feel like they don't know who they are anymore. It is so tricky and so destructive the way that emotional and psychological abuse plays out, because it's done in such a covert way that it is a systematic stripping away of the humanity of another person. And it is time that we stand up and recognize it, especially in our churches, and begin to speak the truth in love and hold people accountable to not behave in these ways any longer.
Wow.
I'd like to say to those who are in these support systems of individuals who are experiencing emotional abuse, believe them. That's what they need. When they are telling you that this person is making them feel like they're crazy or like something didn't happen, or they're making light of situations, or you're even observing, because folk get real comfortable, right? And you may then just think, oh, it was a joke, or that person's not so bad, or kiki it off, as they like to say in pop culture. That's not a thing. You need to take a minute and believe that person and recognize, call it out, call a thing a thing, like somebody said earlier. That's not okay. And if it happens in your presence, don't be an inactive bystander. Say something about it. That was inappropriate. That was demeaning. That was uncalled for. I'm not going to stand for you talking to said woman or said man in that way. Believe the person and offer them support.
I gotta back you up, and then I always bring the real. And there's our secondary bystanders in culture. So there's things like, for instance, you'll see a brother in church and they open the door for their wife. They put their arm around their wife in church. They're up in front of church, kneeling and praying together. And I'll just use me and my wife will lean over and say, why can't you be like that? He's so loving to his wife. And I'll say, not so loving.
Mercy.
See, because I know what he's doing. Again, but I have not said anything. So ladies, I'm the only guy here. There's a thin line of male culture that you are not allowed to break. So if I go to that man and say, hey man, I know you're doing so and so and your wife, he's going to come back to me. It's like, yo, you better not say anything. And I leave it alone. And I'll carry that until she's hurt to the point. And we're all around the dinner table one day and said, brother so-and-so hurt so-and-so. And I knew this was going on, and, how many times have we heard this? Oh, he opens the door. He gives so much money. He sends so-and-so. I used Deandra because we were having fun earlier. She helped Sister Deandra's son, Dr. Deandra's son, go to college on a scholarship. He's such a great guy. Here it is. The great ones are the bad ones too. We have to discern with ourselves. And June said it earlier too. They'll sit down in front of the therapist and they will charm you like because they know what to say and they know what to look for. Especially a male therapist. There are some key words that we say, come on, brother, that's not me. It's her. She works 12 hours a day. I don't see her. I don't know what's going on there. Your wife is a nurse too. These little things. And then, I go to bed and I wrestle at night. And, I'm a big guy myself and I check them and what have you. And then you get the stay out of my business conversation. And this is what's in the pop culture thing. And then I stay in my corner, and he stays in his corner. So
Mhm.
all that glitters is not gold.
Mercy. We have a great question that just came up. Ruth says, sorry if I missed this, but let's talk about the impact on children who observe domestic violence at the home. What can we say to talk about the
Wow.
impact on children?
I'd say that most of what we know comes from what we learn in our environment, and it comes from modeled behavior. So we have to be very careful the model that we are presenting for children. You'll start to notice, especially with emotional abuse, that child who is witnessing it starts talking to their peers in the same way. The child who is experiencing it, right? Because emotional abuse and physical abuse, all the abuses are fair game for everyone. And so you'll start to see that maybe that modeled behavior begins to happen with siblings and peers. And that's where it starts eking out in school and with their friends. And so that's one of the things that we begin to see. You'll also see children regressing, right? Like a child who was fully potty trained and was doing okay might start having accidents at nighttime. Johnny might start wetting the bed. Susie might start having temper tantrums when previously they seemed to be very well-adjusted children. They may be distrustful, right? As young kids and as adolescents, we may begin to see mimicking of those behaviors. That's why we have to have a teen dating violence hotline, because we're seeing violence occur earlier and earlier in relationships. That's not by accident. This is a manifestation of what they were taught relationships were supposed to be. And so it's important to consider, where is this child getting this from? What else is going on in their home? It's just my thoughts on that.
I wanted to that question, please look up the name Karen Purvis. She is the leading expert on trauma in children. Phenomenal. Karen Purvis Institute, and she's got several books. The one that is like my go-to is the Connected Child. Karen Purvis, and so she talks about that. But what I try to help couples understand is that trauma starts way before you even recognize that child is picking it up. The research is telling us now this child is picking it up in the womb. You're screaming at your wife or your spouse, and she's pregnant. That child is picking up the stress. That child is picking up the anxiety. That child is picking up the fight or flight already. And so it's important for us to really begin to monitor and understand and our behavior and the effects. I mentioned before, my husband was one of 9, and his mom was lived in the domestic violence and abuse for 40 years. And every one of them as siblings, and I promise you he's given permission because this is an important topic, and the more we can get the awareness out, the better. Every one of them still today is dealing with the effects of the domestic violence. Every one of them, right? And it's not that they can't, they came from a culture where they didn't get the healing. Name of the book again, The Connected Child. Karen Purvis is her name, Karen Purvis Institute. You can get the resources from. And so they came from a culture where counseling therapy was not a thing, right? Getting help and healing was not a thing. And so I'm telling you, if they're not repeating the cycle, if some of them didn't repeat the cycle of abusing, the others were repeating the cycle of being abused or marrying an abuser. Others are experiencing till this as adults, fear, low self-esteem, no confidence. I mean, on and on, I can just mention, even right now. And so it's really important for those who are understanding, are trying to figure out, should I leave? Should I, because I can hear, and probably counselors as well, I'm going to stay for the children, right? We got to stay for the kids. And what you're actually doing is traumatizing them. Yes. Just putting the truth out there. What you're actually doing is setting them up to repeat the cycle, and maybe if not getting the help, experiencing the effects for the rest of their lives.
Mhm.
And so please get the education, get the help.
Let me
Mhm.
share.
I
I'd
just
like to say,
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Doc.
I'd like to say this is an area where it is easier. I saw mandatory reporting come up several times. It is easier to follow through with a mandatory report in the context of a child's abusive experience. Abuse, neglect, harm in any way, shape, or form with a child can be reported even anonymously.
Mm.
Even if it's just suspected, you have absolutely no proof. That's something that can be disclosed. But when we're talking about adults and adult relationships, in a lot of states, domestic violence does not fall under mandatory reporting. As a veteran, I can say in that population, we have a little bit more latitude to report domestic violence, but that's something that usually only occurs within a military setting because of how it relates to the person doing their job and keeping their family safe. In the state of Ohio, as a psychologist, I cannot report domestic violence. I can encourage my client. I can point them to the services. I'm mandated by ethics and law to document it.
Right.
But that has to be the individual's decision to say something about it. So oftentimes it's something that's really, let's treatment plan around, let's create a safety plan, let's find you some resources, but we can't just pick up the phone and call the police when we think that something is going on, suspected or verified, when it's dealing with an adult. But with a child, if you suspect something is going on in that home, you don't have to have any proof. Call the local child protective services agency for your state, your county, call the school, know who the mandated reporters are, talk to the pediatrician. They'll be able to do some things for you if there is child abuse also occurring.
Awesome. So as we are now drawing to a close, there's two final questions. I'm going to throw them both out, and I'm going to ask the panel to just kind of divide yourself. If we could have at least two people answer one question and then two people address the other one. So Maxine is asking the question, how can our churches be a place of guidance and support for families and couples who are experiencing abuse? How can our churches be a place of guidance and support for families and couples who are experiencing abuse? And then the other question would just simply be, how would you say it is possible for people to overcome being in circumstances and situations like a relationship that has domestic violence? How is it possible for us to have healthy relationships? How can someone overcome? So first, what would you recommend for our churches as far as being a place of guidance and support? And then the second question, how would you encourage somebody as far as, is it possible to overcome?
I'll take the church question, and whoever wants to join with it. So the church is somewhat of a social club, unfortunately. And one of the things that I advocate for from a public health point of view and from a mental health point of view, you walk into your church, they have a special day for everything. Ladies' Day, Men's Day, Ushers' Day, Children's Day. You get the idea of what's going on. You can go a whole year at church and nobody speaks about domestic violence. And domestic violence only gets bounced down if something public has happened or they hear of a colleague has gotten hurt. Another thing is in marketing or public health, there's a lot of things that are free from New York City to New York State. Dr. Jalel could tell you about that. You could get free. And you walk by the bulletin boards in church or go to your church website, they talk about nothing. Look, when COVID has came out, we really didn't talk about that today, but when COVID has come out, you see everything about COVID, you see things about vaccines, you see things about better fatherhood. So the county and the state and even the federal government have documentation digitally and by paper to talk about domestic violence. If we don't see it or talk about it, we won't do anything about it. Our churches does not, that's right, Shauna K, end it now. All of those things we do not have. I could guarantee you if I was to run a poll right now, nobody have talked about domestic violence. Even in this pandemic, where domestic violence has jumped, between 13 and 18% over the last year. So we have to put it out front. We have to put it on our websites. And most of all, we need to talk about it, and the leaders need to chastise it, and the leaders need to come down on people who exercises domestic violence. Because I can guarantee you, leaders of different departments knows, and the conversation needs to be had.
I would just
I
tell
love
you,
the idea of talking. Go ahead.
I would just tell you, I would love to see our church do exactly what Christ did when he walked the face of this earth. And that was meet people at their point of need. The way that we live together, work together, and play together is the gospel proclaimed. There is no better way for our churches to spend their resources than actually finding out what the needs are of the people who sit in their pew every week. And then put their money, not in the sound system, not in all these other things where we put our money. Let's put our money where the needs are. So that when a woman or a man comes and they disclose that there is abuse, we can separate you because you don't have to worry about paying your bill this month. We can give you a space to actually have the clarity to recognize that what you've been suffering, why you're so cloudy and foggy and think it's all your fault, is because you've been under emotional abuse for so long that you think you're to blame for the behavior the other person's placing.
Wow, sure.
If we would actually listen to the felt needs of the people who sit in our pews and thereby reach the community, because the biggest thing that the community is going to hear is my church member who says, you know what, I went through domestic violence and my church helped me overcome it. Not because they preached another sermon on Sabbath morning or Sunday morning, but because they actually gave me the financial support and helped me move my things out. So I did not have to call the police, who nothing was going to happen with. I could actually move into a place that was undisclosed to him. I could get myself together. There's a paid counselor on staff at my church that doesn't have an office in my church. So it's confidential. I'm on a soapbox now, but you begin to get the picture of my
No,
passion.
we're good. We're good.
You said it all.
We're good. You said it.
We need to say it.
Yep.
Yeah. Can I
Love
just
it.
add? I listen, she took most of the words, but I think that also leadership should invest in finding ways to create advocates within the church. Yes, a counselor on staff, but what about opportunities to sponsor sexual assault victim advocacy training, domestic violence victim advocacy training? Let's stop pressing people out to find external resources, and let's provide them in a space where people are already feeling safe, where people already know, you know what, I can come here and I can be taken care of economically, logistically, and emotionally, and legally. And so for all of the professionals that we have within our church systems, how can we offer our time, right? As counselors or as attorneys, what can we do? Not to get in everybody's business, but to say, this is what I know, and this is how I can help you through that process, only to a certain extent. But this is what I can do for you. And how, as leaders, can we bring some of those resources into our church system? And also, as pastors, knowing your limitations.
Yes.
Right?
Good one. Yes.
Our pastors get wonderful education.
Yes.
But it is limited. And so knowing your boundaries, knowing your limitations, and then being able to provide community resources or have them within your congregation, I think is a good strategy.
Yes. Well, listen, we have had an extremely powerful conversation this afternoon. We want to encourage everybody who's watching, definitely replay this, but don't watch it by yourself. This needs to be a community conversation that you're having in your home with your children, with your spouse. This needs to be a conversation that you get some of your ladies, your brothers together. You sit, you watch, and you kind of vibe and you kind of talk, because we are all supposed to be a part of awareness, prevention, and redemption in our community. Thank you to all of my panelists. This has been extremely what's the right word? This has been extremely beneficial. There we go. Extremely beneficial. I have learned a lot today. I'm going to ask each of you, for our viewers, if anybody wants to keep in touch with you, if anybody wants to send you a question or let you know what they appreciated from what you shared, what is the best way they can keep in touch with you? We'll start with Dr. Jackson and then end with Dr. Amador.
You can find me on Instagram. My handle is at Dr. D Jackson. Again, that's Instagram. And I have a practice website for those who are in Ohio and might want to have some sort of private therapeutic conversation. And I can be found at epiphanypsychotherapy.com.
Mm-hmm. My webpage, you can contact me confidentially there, and that's the letter R, 1, 2, and TWO. It's from Romans 12:2, so r122.com. And my Instagram page is also r122.com, and you can DM me there as well.
Thank you. Counselor Gary?
All right. Thank you again for having me here, Adrian. But I'm going to start something that's very personal. I'm on Facebook. My Facebook group is Boss Move, Soft Move. A lot of you are followers there, and definitely this is a boss move. I'm biased to it, and I will support. I'm also on Instagram. Had to change it because we had some hackers on there. I am the authentic Gary Graham, and if you want to have private practice, or I am on Psychology Today. And you could find me on Psychology Today. And praise God, my SEO has me going right to the top because I have this opportunity. And last but not least, I'm available for consulting on public health. We still do contact tracing, and we match public health with mental health. We do speak, we do seminars, and we do private one-on-one speaking to ministers and to church leaders about mental health. And once again, it was an honor to be on this panel with everybody.
Awesome. Coach Zavala.
And yeah, everybody, I'm Latoya, and my website is Freed and Powered Up, right? So past tense, because we're speaking as though it is. So freedandpoweredup.com. My blog is there. I have a podcast that I'm giving my experience of other women with domestic violence and different perspectives, new, fresh perspectives on it. It's by the same name, Freed and Powered Up. It's on both Apple and Spotify. And I'm on Instagram at Latoya Zavala _free. Latoya Zavala _is_free. I'd love to chat with you. Nah.
Yeah, and I a little different. I don't have a private practice, but I work at a university. However, my professional email is my first and last name, JAELAMADOR@gmail.com. And I'm available for consultations and to connect you to referrals or to answer any questions.
Awesome. So again, to everyone, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this, I've already seen some comments that have been in the comment section saying that this was wonderful. I want you to go ahead and hit that love button and let our panelists know just how much we appreciated them being here today. I do want to encourage you to watch the replay. Seriously, this was a power-packed, locked and loaded session, right? Everything's not going to be solved in one session. We couldn't discuss everything. However, the knowledge that was put forth here is enough for us all to be able to have very real actionable steps on how we will hold ourselves accountable and others accountable, and also seek freedom by asking and reaching out for help. So we want to invite you to replay this, watch it on your own, and watch it with others. I also want to invite everyone to save the date. Save the date, November 21, 2020 at 4 p.m. Go ahead and put it in the comment section. November 21st. See, the I'm All This sessions we do every month. Last month was depression. This month, domestic violence. Next month, I'm all of this. I failed. I cannot find purpose for my pain, and I still believe God. I'm going to say that again. November 21 at 4 p.m. on the Forward Movement Facebook page. The next session is entitled, I'm All of This. I've failed. I cannot find purpose for my pain, and I still believe in God. You don't want to miss this session. Some of our panelists will be Dr. Julian Johnson and Robert Kennedy. You don't want to miss this at all. In about 6 weeks, family, I will be launching a self-guided journal entitled, drumroll, A Greater Force Than Fear. Oh, praise God. A Greater Force Than Fear. It is a self-guided journal that I'm super excited to share with the world. Please stay in contact with Forward Movement Ministry so that you can know when the launch date is, support, and also get your copy. With that said, I also want to invite you to go ahead and join the Forward Movement Ministries Mobilizers private group. In the private group, you'll get a behind the scene look on the journal, the launch dates, and then also you're going to get things first in there. So, for example, all of our panelists, they are doing videos, short nuggets for us to kind of go over the conversation we're having today. Coach Latoya Zavala did hers last week. That was our preview video. If you have not seen it, please check out the Forward Movement Ministries page. You'll find that preview video. Tonight, we are going to show Dr. Jackson's video, her Afterglow video. If you are a part of the Mobilizers group, you'll get a chance to see that tonight. If you're not in the group, then you're going to have to wait until tomorrow. And then each week for the next several weeks, we'll have a video from our different panelists. But again, I want to invite you to join the Forward Movement Mobilizers private group. You can also find me on YouTube, Adrienne Townsend Benton. You'll find sermons and different resiliency videos. And this video will be posted to YouTube in a few hours. So look out for the launch date and also save the date, November 21 at 4 p.m. As always, share, and walk with the King, my friends, and truly be a blessing.